The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with the sound of quiet voices and the soft hum of machines. Tall windows showed the endless black of space beyond, filled with slow-moving ships and faraway lights. The council members sat in a wide circle, each in a high seat marked with their world's banner, their faces cold and distant. The meeting had gone on for hours, and for most of it, Earth had been silent. Captain Elias sat in his seat near the edge of the circle, wearing the simple, dark uniform of the Terran fleet, his jaw tight, his eyes moving from one alien leader to another. The talk had been about trade routes, about border disputes, about the expansion of the Vorith Empire in the far reaches. But no one had asked the humans for their view. Earth was new to the Council, too new to be taken seriously. At least that was what most of them believed. Then the ambassador from Vurek Prime spoke, his voice high and sharp, his body tall and thin like a walking blade, his eyes narrow and bright. He laughed in a way that made the hair rise on the back of Elias's neck. And then the words came, clear and heavy in the air. Why speak of Earth at all? It is a backwater dirt ball, a place of storms and mud and small mines. The other council members laughed softly or smiled without warmth. It was not a joke to Elias, but to them it was the truth. The humans had no fleets of dreadnoughts, no shields that could stop a sunblast, no armies that could march across worlds. To the galaxy, Earth was just a pale blue in a forgotten arm of space, a place that had never shaped the great events of the stars. Elias could feel the burn of anger in his chest, but he did not speak. He knew if he spoke now, they would only laugh more. The history of humanity was filled with moments when the strong laughed at the weak, but the weak found a way to win. His mind went to the stories of Earth's past, the way people had fought with stones before they had iron, the way they had sailed into unknown waters with nothing but wind and courage, the way they had built cities in deserts and frozen wastes. Earth had always survived, not because it was the strongest, but because it refused to die. The ambassador kept speaking, his thin hands moving in the air, his long fingers slicing the space between them. We have real dangers to discuss, real powers to watch. Why waste the Council's time on a planet that has not even reached full galactic standard in weapons or science? Elias kept his eyes steady, his voice silent, but in his mind he made a promise, a cold and simple one. They will see. One day they will see what Earth can do. Then the great screen above the chamber changed. The soft blue of the Council seal vanished, replaced by flashing red letters. The alarms echoed through the chamber, the sound sharp and urgent. Every head turned to the display. The letters were in the common tongue, large and impossible to miss. Threat approaching. All worlds prepare. The council leader, an old and heavy creature from the water world of Koro, struck the side of his seat, the sound silencing the room. The chamber's great voice system came alive, and a report began to play. A deep voice spoke of incoming warships in numbers never seen before, their origin unknown, their path cutting across 3 border systems. The words were slow and heavy. The threat was real, and it was coming fast. All around him, Elias could see alien leaders turning to one another, whispering in low tones, their faces tense, their eyes calculating. The fear was there, even if they tried to hide it. The council leader called for data, for maps, for fleets to be mobilized. And in the middle of it all, more than one set of eyes turned toward the humans, not in hope, but in expectation that they would step back, that they would let the stronger worlds handle it. Elias understood in that moment what they thought. They expected Earth to hide, to keep its people safe on their little blue planet, to stay quiet and invisible while the giants of the galaxy moved to fight. They expected submission, obedience, the quiet fear of the weak. But he also knew something they did not. Humanity had never been quiet in the face of danger. The instinct to fight was written deep in their bones, and when the time came, they would not hide. The council moved quickly. Orders were sent to the great fleets of the core worlds. Warships began to form at staging points near the border. But there was no invitation for Earth to join, no seat at the war table. The humans were dismissed with polite words, told to stay within their borders, told that the danger was too great for a world like theirs to face. Elias left the chamber in silence, walking down the long halls of the station, his mind heavy with the sound of their laughter, the image of their calm dismissal burning in his thoughts. Outside the great windows, Ships moved like silver fish through the black, powerful, proud, certain of their place in the galaxy. He boarded the small Terran transport waiting for him. The pilot, a young woman named Kara, gave him a look that said she had seen the broadcast. "They laughed again, didn't they?" she said, her voice quiet, her hand steady on the controls. Elias only nodded, his eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. "Let them laugh. They won't be laughing for long." The transport turned toward the path home, leaving the bright lights of the council station behind. As the stars slid past, Elias's mind returned to an image he had seen on the journey in, a distant colony, not human, not part of the council, destroyed in a single night, the work of something terrible moving through the darkness. There had been no survivors, no warning, only wreckage and silence. Now, that same shadow was moving toward the heart of the galaxy. Elias knew what had to be done. If the council would not call on Earth, then Earth would act alone. There was no choice. He could see the shape of it already, a plan forming in the back of his mind, a way to turn the galaxy's greatest insult into its greatest shock, the kind of move that would make the name of Earth echo in the chambers of power for centuries to come. Kara glanced at him once, her eyes searching his face. "You're thinking about something dangerous," she said, her voice more statement than question. Elias gave her a small, cold smile. "Not dangerous, necessary." And somewhere deep inside, far away from the polished halls and cold laughter of the council, the heart of Earth began to beat faster. The same heartbeat that had carried them through ice ages and wars. The same beat that had pushed them into the unknown time and time again. The same beat that would soon show the galaxy that the small blue world they had dismissed was about to change everything forever. The Vorash had no voice in the council, no place in the halls of debate. They spoke only with fire and destruction. Their fleets were not built for patrol or defense. They were forged for one purpose: to erase everything in their path. No messages sent, no demands given. Only the silent approach of dark metal hulls moving like shadows across the stars. When the first reports came from the Vega outpost, they were short and broken. The transmissions filled with static and the sharp hiss of interference. A single frightened voice tried to speak over the noise, describing huge shapes moving through the void, shapes that blotted out the stars. The last thing heard was a scream. Then the channel went dead. The council labeled the signal as unverified, but Elias knew the truth. He had seen the way the galaxy turned away from danger until it was too late. As the Vorash moved closer, the stronger worlds began to gather their fleets. Massive warships with shining hulls lined up at staging grounds, their weapons charged, their shields glowing like suns, yet none of them called Earth. The official reason was safety. The quiet truth was arrogance. They believed the humans could not help, that they would only be a burden. The insult was still fresh in Elias's mind, the memory of their laughter pushing him toward a decision he could not take back. The Terran transport slipped into orbit over Earth, the blue and green world turning slowly beneath them. Cities glowed like constellations on the night side, and Elias felt the old pull of home, the gravity of the planet not in weight, but in belonging. Kara guided the craft down toward the hidden base in the Rocky Mountains. The entrance a dark wound in the rock, sealed and forgotten by anyone outside the Terran fleet. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of oil and heat. Machines clanged and whirred as crews worked around the clock, not on sleek cruisers or towering dreadnoughts, but on something far stranger. Elias walked past rows of frames that looked nothing like the polished ships of the council. Here there were vessels made from old cargo haulers stripped of their heavy walls, mining rigs rebuilt with weapons where drills had once been, fighter jets from Earth's past reborn with alien scrap bolted to their wings, ugly, fast, and unpredictable. They were the kind of machines no council engineer would dare to design, and that was exactly why Elias believed they would work. Chief Engineer Rourke was waiting, a broad man with grease on his hands and a grin that never seemed to fade. "We've got 12 ready to fly. More coming if we can keep parts coming in. They're not pretty, Captain, but they're mean," he said, his voice rough but sure. Elias nodded, looking over the jagged lines and strange shapes of the ships. Each one different, each one built for a pilot who knew how to make chaos into a weapon. News from the outer rim kept coming, and each day it was worse. The Vorash did not slow, they did not negotiate. They swallowed system after system, burning colonies to ash, sometimes leaving planets spinning empty, stripped of every living thing. The council debated endlessly, arguing over where to place fleets, how to protect trade routes. But never once did they see the value in what Earth could bring. They were bound by their own rules, their own careful plans, while the Vorash moved. Without pattern, without mercy, and without fear. One night, as Elias stood in the dim glow of the command deck, Kara came to him with a small data chip, her voice low. This came from a relay station near Vega, the one they thought was destroyed, she said, handing it over. The recording flickered into the air, showing grainy images of the Vorash ships, their hulls black and jagged, their weapons glowing with a sick red light. The shapes were wrong, too sharp, too fast. They moved like predators that had learned to hunt in the dark. Elias felt the cold settle into his chest. The time for waiting was over. He gathered the pilots in the main hangar, the air buzzing with the smell of fuel and the low growl of engines. The faces before him were young and old, some fresh from training, others veterans of smaller wars. None of them had faced a Vorash before, but all of them had the same fire in their eyes. Elias spoke not with long speeches, but with simple truth. They think we will hide. They think we will stay out of the fight. They think we are weak. Let's show them they are wrong. The plan was simple and dangerous beyond reason. The first squadron would leave at dawn, moving not toward the safety of the inner worlds, but straight for the edge of Vorash space. The council fleets were still gathering far from the front, following their slow, careful orders. But the humans would strike first, not to win the war in a single blow, but to bleed the enemy, to make them doubt, to show the galaxy that Earth did not wait for permission to survive. Kara volunteered for the lead wing, her voice steady as she spoke. If they want to erase us, let them try, but they'll have to catch us first. Her ship was one of the strangest in the hangar, built from a racing craft and the remains of crashed alien fighter. Its engines roared like a storm trapped in metal. Elias knew she was the right choice. As the squadron prepared to launch, the hangar doors opened, revealing the dark sky above the Rockies. The stars were sharp and cold against the black. The ships rose one by one, their engines leaving streaks of light in the air, the sound echoing off the mountains before fading into silence. Elias watched them vanish into the night, a quiet weight settling in his chest, pride mixed with fear, knowing that not all of them would come back. Far away, beyond the rim, the Vorash fleet moved like a storm, unaware that prey was now turning into a hunter, unaware that small, ugly ships were coming for them with the speed of desperation and the teeth of invention. In the halls of the council, the debate still raged, words passing back and forth like empty weapons, none of them knowing that the first shots of a very different kind of war were already about to be fired. In the quiet after the launch, Elias walked through the empty hangar, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He placed a hand on the wing of one ship still in repair, feeling the rough welds, the sharp edges. It was nothing like the smooth curves of alien design. It was human through and through, built from whatever could be found, stronger for its scars, just like the people who made it. Above the mountains, the stars kept their silent watch. But in the dark spaces between them, something was moving, a shadow that had swallowed countless worlds, a shadow that believed it could not be stopped. The Vorash did not yet know the name of Earth, but they would, and when they did, it would not be as a footnote in galactic history, but as the spark that turned the tide. Elias turned toward the command deck, already thinking of the next step, already seeing the maps in his mind, the places where the Vorash would never expect an attack, the weak points no one else had seen. The war had already begun for him, and he would make sure the rest of the galaxy knew it too, no matter how many doubted, no matter how many laughed, no matter how much it cost. Somewhere in the black, Kara's squadron cut through the void, their patched and jagged ships leaving faint trails of light, heading toward the enemy with the kind of reckless courage only humans seem to have. They did not know if they would live to see another sunrise, but that was never the point. The point was to fight, to make the enemy bleed, and to show the galaxy that Earth was never as small as they thought. Deep under the Rocky Mountains, the hidden base never slept. Its long halls echoed with the sound of tools striking metal and the low rumble of engines being tested. Crews worked without pause, their faces marked with sweat and the glow of hard light screens here. There was no waiting for the council to grant permission here. Every hour was a race against the shadow, moving closer across the stars. Captain Elias stood at the edge of the central hangar watching the chaos with a quiet focus. Lines of half-built ships stood in uneven rows, their shapes sharp and strange, their surfaces patched with plates of different colors and metals. Some pieces were from old Terran cargo haulers, others from alien wreckage found drifting on forgotten routes. None of it matched, and that was the beauty of it. These machines could not be predicted, they could not be read by the enemy. The council fleets moved like clockwork, but humanity had never fought that way and never would. Chief Engineer Rourke came toward Elias, his wide shoulders blotting out the light. Behind him, his hands stained black with grease, and his grin fierce. As ever, we are ahead of schedule, Captain. He said, 3 more ready by sunrise. We are tearing apart everything not nailed down to make these beasts work, and they will work, trust me. Elias nodded, his eyes sweeping over the ships. He could almost see them in the black of space, darting and weaving in ways the Vorash had never faced. At the far end of the hangar, Kara was speaking to her wing pilots, her hands moving in quick, sharp gestures. Each of them wore flight suits that were scratched and patched more times than anyone could count. They were not the polished warriors of the core worlds. They were survivors, scavengers, fighters who knew that sometimes winning meant making the other side fall apart in confusion rather than brute force. The plan forming in Elias's mind was dangerous, but danger was the only card Earth had to play. They could not match the Vorash in numbers or raw power, but they could strike where it hurt and vanish before the enemy could strike back. Rourke had been working on something to make that vanish possible, a series of improvised cloaking rigs built from mining shield projectors and stealth paint scraped off abandoned drones. They would not make the ships invisible, but they would make them hard to track, especially when moving fast and low. Elias called a meeting in the war room. The pilots filed in along with Rourke and the base's small intelligence team. The hollow table lit up, showing the jagged red lines of Vorash movement. The enemy fleets were spread wide, swallowing up outposts with little resistance. The council fleets were still holding position far behind the front, arguing over the safest way to advance. Elias traced a path with his finger across the map. This is where we hit them, he said, pointing to a thin line of supply convoys moving between 2 captured systems. If we cut this line, they will have to slow down, and if they slow down, the council will finally have to notice us. One of the younger pilots frowned and asked, what if the council tells us to stand down? Elias met his eyes and replied, we are not asking the council this time. This is Earth's fight, whether they see it or not. The room went quiet as the weight of his words settled, and everyone knew what disobeying the council meant: exile. If they were lucky, destruction. If they were not, but not one person left their seat. The next 2 days were a storm of preparation. Rourke's teams worked non-stop, adding the cloaking rigs and overcharging the engines. The pilots ran drills through narrow mountain canyons, flying so close to the rock that one mistake would mean death. They practiced sudden turns and violent stops, learning to use the weight of their patched-together ships to throw off tracking systems. Elias moved among them, speaking little, but watching everything, memorizing faces, knowing he might never see some of them again. On the 3rd night, the alarm for launch sounded. The hangar roared to life as engines lit up with a deep, hungry growl. The great mountain doors slid open, revealing the cold sweep of night sky. The stars seemed to watch as the first ship lifted off, followed by another and another, until 12 jagged shapes rose into the darkness, their hulls catching the faint light of Earth below. Kara's voice came over the comm, steady and sure like a steel line. We go quiet from here. Captain, see you on the other side. The squadron vanished into the black, leaving Elias on the ground with a silence heavier than any sound. He walked back into the war room, where a single display tracked the faint ghost signals of the departing ships. They were moving fast, low, along the edges of patrol zones, every movement calculated to be just wrong enough that the enemy sensors might dismiss them as debris or harmless traffic. Hours passed like slow tides. Elias stood the whole time, watching the board and thinking about the Vorash. He knew from the fragments of reports that they fought with brutal precision, every move a direct line toward destruction. They would not understand a fight that bent every rule of fight, that changed direction before it began. That was the human way. In the depths of space, the squadron reached the edge of Vorash territory. The cloaking rigs hummed faintly, the hulls of the ships absorbing and scattering light. Kara gave the signal, and they broke formation, scattering into different approach paths. No single path was safe, but together they would reach the convoy before the Vorash could react. Through the dark, Kara could see them ahead, great black freighters shaped like blades escorted by tall, thin warships, their engines glowing like angry stars. The humans did not charge, and they moved slow and strange, some ships drifting as if damaged, others vanishing into asteroid shadows. When the Vorash escorts finally noticed the intruders, it was already too late. Kara's wing cut in from the side, targeting the freighter's drives, while the others unleashed a storm of missiles and improvised plasma bursts. The Vorash moved to return fire, but the human ships were never where they were supposed to be. Spinning, rolling, diving into positions no battle manual would ever suggest. Back on Earth, the war room filled with tense voices as the first signs of battle lit up the sensors. Ghost signals flared and vanished. Elias could almost see it in his mind, the chaos of motion, the enemy twisting to track targets that were already gone. Within minutes, the convoy was burning, the freighters breaking apart into bright shards, drifting through the void. The Vorash escorts tried to chase, but each time they closed on one ship, another came from nowhere, striking hard, then vanishing into the black. Kara's voice crackled over the comm. To Elias, the line cut in and out, but the words were clear: convoy destroyed, returning home. In the hangar hours later, the ships came back one by one, scarred and smoking, but alive. The crews climbed out, their faces pale with exhaustion, but lit with something else, a fire Elias had not seen before. Rourke clapped one pilot on the shoulder, grinning through the grime. "You just made history, kid," he said, and the pilot only laughed, a short, breathless sound, but real. Elias looked at the jagged line of ships and the people who flew them, and knew this was only the beginning. They had cut the enemy once, now they would do it again and again, until the galaxy understood Earth was never the prey and never would be again. In the cold reach of the Vegas sector, the Vorash convoy wreckage still drifted among the black waves of space. Broken freighters turning slowly with shattered hulls, leaking fragments of cargo. In frozen air, the escorts gone silent, their twisted frames floating like ghosts. The strike had been fast, brutal, and unlike anything the Vorash had faced before. Their commanders were already demanding answers and revenge. Deep in the Vorash War Council, aboard the command vessel Blood Fong, tall shadowed figures studied the wreckage. Reports, their dark armor gleaming under red light, their voices low and sharp. They spoke of strange ships that moved without pattern, ships that turned faster than scanners could track, ships that seemed to ignore the expected rules of battle. One commander hissed that they must be pirates, another said they must be a secret weapon of the core worlds, but none guessed the truth, that these were the humans, the same weak world the rest of the galaxy ignored. Back on Earth, the hidden base roared with renewed energy. The pilots returned from the Vegas strike were being treated for burns and bruises, but they walked with heads high, their voices alive with the heat of victory. In the war room, Captain Elias watched as the Vorash fleet shifted its movement. Supply lines rerouted, escorts doubled, patrols stretched thinner in other sectors, exactly as he had hoped. Each extra guard meant fewer ships on the front lines and fewer chances for them to push deeper into council space. Kara stood beside Elias, still in her patch flight suit, her voice quiet but steady. "They will come for us now," she said. Elias nodded. "They will, but not here. We will be gone before they can find us." Rourke was already tearing into the next phase of the plan, his crews working on refitting the damaged ships and preparing decoys. Each decoy was a hollow shell built from scrap hull plating and old engine parts, designed to look like a human strike craft on scanners, but carrying no crew, only explosives. These would be sent drifting in key sectors, ready to detonate when Vorash ships moved in close. Far away, the Council had received the first reports of the Vega convoy attack. Official channels called an unknown strike, but the unofficial whispers were already spreading. The stories told of a small, fast force with strange tactics, the kind of force that could make even the Vorash pull back. Some council members doubted the truth, others feared it, and a few began to suspect the humans might be involved. Still, no one sent for Earth, no one admitted that they might need them. The next target came into view sooner than Elias expected, a Vorash raiding fleet moving toward a mining colony in the Sirius system. The colony had no defenses, only cargo haulers and small shuttles the Council fleet assigned to protect the region was still days away. Elias knew that by the time they arrived, nothing would be left. He called the pilots together in the hangar, his voice low and firm this time. We do not just strike and vanish. This time we break them in front of witnesses. The plan was bold, bordering on reckless. The human strike force would hit the Vorash head-on in the open, pulling them into a fight they could not win cleanly. But the goal was not to destroy them outright. It was to show the colony and anyone watching the humans could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's worst killers. When the strike force launched, the ships rose into the night over Earth like a wave of jagged shadows, their engines burning bright as they cut into the void. Kara led the first wing with a mix of veteran pilots and new blood hungry for the fight. The journey to Sirius was short by war standards, but long enough for the crew to feel the weight of what was coming. They all knew this was different. This was not the quiet shadow work of the last strike. This was an open challenge. The Vorash arrived at the colony expecting no resistance. Their ships descended like blades ready to cut the mining platforms to pieces. But then the humans came in fast and low, bursting from the dark with weapons already hot. The first volley of missiles tore through a Vorash frigate before it could raise shields. The second wave came from below, where no sane pilot would fly. But humans were not following Vorash manuals. They twisted and dubbed between the enemy ships, forcing them to turn and break formation. From the colony, surface workers and families looked up through thick glass windows and saw the sky above them burning with light. They had seen war before, but never like this. These were not Council fleets moving in perfect lines. These were wild fighters rolling and climbing in impossible arcs, striking hard and disappearing only to strike again. Elias watched from the command ship, sending quick orders and shifting wings into gaps before the Vorash could seal them. Each time the enemy tried to focus on one human ship, another came in from behind, tearing into their engines or targeting their weapons pods. Rourke's decoys drifted in from the far side of the system. Vorash patrol ships moved to intercept and exploded in sudden fire, leaving the survivors scattered and confused. The battle raged for an hour, and the humans never gave the Vorash a clean target. Finally, Kara's voice came over the comm sharp and certain. They're pulling back. Captain Elias ordered a final strike. The human ships cutting into the retreating Vorash with a last burst of missiles and plasma fire before breaking off themselves. The Vorash limped out of the system, leaving the colony intact and the people alive. As the human strike force formed up for the return, the colony sent a wide beam message across every channel. This was not the polished language of Council reports. It was raw and loud. The humans are here, and they saved us. The message reached ships in neighboring sectors, and from there it spread faster than any official statement. Soon even the Council could not ignore it. When the strike force landed back at the base, the hangar erupted in cheers. Rourke laughed so loud it echoed off the steel walls. Kara pulled off her helmet, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself smile wide and unguarded. Elias walked through the noise without speaking, letting the sight of his people standing together sink deep into his mind. They had drawn blood in the open. Now, the war was no longer a shadow game. Far in the dark reaches of space, aboard the Blood Fong, the Vorash commanders studied the serious battle reports, their voices colder than the void. They had lost 2 frigates, 3 escorts, and the colony they had been sent to destroy. Their scans showed human ships moving in ways that defied their tracking systems. One commander hissed that they would crush this insect world. Soon the others agreed, their next moves already turning toward Earth, even if they did not yet know where to strike. Elias knew the danger was coming, but he also knew something else. The galaxy had just seen what humans could do, and there was no taking that back. The first blood was drawn, and the fight was only beginning. The echo of the serious battle had not faded when the Council chambers filled with heavy voices from every corner of known space. The delegates sat in tall, curved rows, their faces lit by the shifting holographic map of the front lines, red marks for Vorash advances and pale blue for the Council defense lines. Yet in one corner of the map, a small cluster of golden sparks now shone, each one marking a confirmed human strike. The Council had never asked for those sparks, yet here they were undeniable. Ambassador Cyril of the Vesh leaned forward, his scaled fingers drumming against the table, his voice smooth but Sharp asking how a species outside the Council could field such ships and why their actions had not been sanctioned by proper channels across the chamber. A representative from the mining colony answered in a voice filled with heat, because if they had waited for proper channels, we would all be dead. The room broke into a storm of overlapping words, some demanding human integration into the fleet, others warning that such wild fighters could not be trusted. The council leader, a towering gray-skinned figure named Valorn, raised one long arm for silence, his eyes narrow, as he asked the one question none wanted to answer: who are the humans really? Far below the shining chambers on the council station docks a human shuttle approached under heavy escort, its hull still bearing the scorches of the serious fight. Inside, Captain Elias Kara and Rourke sat strapped in a narrow seats, their eyes scanning the alien station. Through small viewports, the station curved like a giant silver ring around a blue-white star, the sight stunning even to veterans, but none of them came here for wonder. When the shuttle landed, a squad of council guards guided them into the lift shafts, rising through layers of glass floors, showing glimpses of vast gardens, markets, and hangars filled with ships of every size. Whispers followed them from workers and traders. Word of the human strike force had spread far faster than any official report now. They were not just rumors, they were flesh and blood walking among them. At the council gates, Valorn himself met them, his voice low and formal, as he welcomed them, and without waiting for a reply turned and led them into the central hall. There the delegates watched in measured silence as the humans took their seats at the circular table, a space that had been empty for decades, reserved for a species long vanished. Valorn began with formal accusations of unsanctioned combat operations and violation of council military codes. Elias did not flinch, his answer calm but unyielding: your codes would have left the serious colony in ashes. You speak of order, but the Vorash do not wait for order. Kara's voice cut and sharp. They will come for more colonies, and every delay is another grave. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably, others leaned forward with intracerebral hissed that humans were reckless, dangerous, unfit for council trust. But the mining colony representative stood and said, dangerous is what kept my people alive that day. The debate raged for hours, maps and battle footage flashing above the table, showing Vorash lines stretching deeper in a council space, showing human strike patterns breaking convoys and forcing retreats, even against larger forces. In the end, Valorn's voice fell into a heavy pause. Then he said the humans will be allowed provisional status in the joint fleet. They will act under their own command, but their movements will be reported to the council. In returned, they will share tactics and technology. It was not full membership, but it was a doorway. Elias accepted with a nod, knowing that once the door was open, it would never be closed again. That night, in the council station barracks, the human crew gathered around low tables with trays of alien food, some sweet, some bitter. Rourke tasted something purple and was declaring it was probably meant to clean engine parts. Kara sat quietly, her mind already turning over the next mission. The Vorash would react to Sirius. They would come harder and faster. They needed to be ready. Across the station, in a shadowed chamber, Vorash spies had already begun sending word back to their masters. The humans were here, the council was bending to them, and the war might change in ways the Vorash had not predicted. The next morning, the humans walked into the Joint Fleet Strategy Room for the first time, the walls alive with shifting stars, each marked with symbols for fleets, bases, and supply lines. Council admirals in rich uniforms turned as they entered, some hiding contempt, others hiding curiosity. The lead strategist, a four-armed Relkan named Drav, shook Elias's hand firmly, his voice gravel low. We have been waiting to see what you can do. The first session was tense. The council fleets were trained to move in massive formations, covering each other with overlapping fields of fire. They believed in steady pushes and strongholds. Humans saw it differently. They believed in breaking the enemy apart, forcing them to chase shadows, hitting fast and vanishing before the counterstrike. Elias stood before the star map and laid out a plan that made several admirals frown in disbelief. Instead of defending 3 vulnerable supply routes, he proposed letting 2 fall under light guard, while hiding a human strike wing near the third. The Vorash would commit heavy forces to the easy targets, only to find themselves trapped when the real supply route became a spear aimed at their flank. Drav listened without interrupting, then slowly turned to Valorn, saying it might work, and more importantly, the risk was acceptable compared to the losses they were already taking. Within a week, the plan was in motion, human ships operating alongside a small mix of Council craft trained in their new hit and vanish-style Rourke's engineers modified the Council frigates to handle sharper turns and sudden bursts of speed. The alien crews cursed the strange controls, but soon began to see the value in them. The trap was set in the shadow of a dead star. Two Council supply convoys moved openly, drawing the Vorash in as predicted. Enemy cruisers and frigates dropped from warp hungry for the easy kill. Then the hidden human wings struck, cutting into the Vorash engines before they could even bring weapons online. Council frigates joined the attack, moving faster than their pursuers expected. The battle was over in minutes, leaving the Vorash scattered and limping away. Back at the Council war table, the victory replayed in crisp holograms, showing how the combined tactics worked for the first time. Some admirals nodded at the humans without scorn. Valorn's voice was cool, but carried a thread of respect, saying this may be the beginning of a turning tide if we are wise enough to ride it. For Elias and his crew, the message was clear. They were no longer fighting alone, but the stakes had grown higher with every Council ship that learned human tactics. The Vorash would grow more desperate, and somewhere in the black, they were already shaping their next move. In the weeks after the ambush near the Dead Star, the Council fleets began to shift their formations faster, adopting pieces of human strategy, but never the full picture. The humans kept the most dangerous moves for themselves, not out of greed, but because only they could fly with that kind of reckless precision. The Vorash, however, were not idle. They studied every loss, every feint, every sudden strike. And soon they saw the truth. The humans were the knife tip piercing their armor. Deep in Vorash command, a warlord named Kareth stood before a swirling map of Council space, his body a blend of sinew and black armor plates, his voice like grinding stone. He told his lieutenants that the Council could bleed for years, but if the humans were cut out, the wound would close. He ordered the forging of a spear fleet of formation designed for one purpose: to hunt down and erase the human presence entirely. Unaware of the scale of the coming storm, Elias and his crew continued training Council pilots on rapid assault patterns. Kara spent hours drilling mixed teams on simulated asteroid runs. Rourke pushed engineering crews to strip every spare kilo from the ships for more speed, yet whispers of strange movements on the Vorash border began to creep into reports: convoys vanishing, scouts not returning. Then a Council listening post on the far rim sent one last broken transmission before silence. The war table on the Council station lit with red as the fleet signals vanished. Valorn called an emergency session. The Vorash spear fleet was moving fast, burning through systems without slowing their path, a straight line toward the human sector. Elias stood, studying the map, his voice low and certain. "They're coming for us." Kara asked how many ships. Valorn answered, "More than the combined human fleet could face alone, and perhaps more than the Council could intercept in time." Elias did not wait for orders. He called every human ship from patrol, recalled every crew from rest. They gathered at Haven Point, the first human-built station outside Sol, its towers gleaming against the cold void below them. The planet Seraph spun in quiet blue, unaware of the danger. Above, the humans had never fought a battle of this size before, but retreat would only scatter them and invite the Vorash to hunt the survivors one by one. Kara took command of the scout wings, placing them in deep orbit shadows. Rourke oversaw the arming of every weapon from shipborne rail cannons to missile racks stripped from half-completed frigates. The civilians on Haven Point were evacuated under cover of the gathering fleet. Still, the station lights seemed to dim, as if the void itself knew what was coming. 3 days later, the Vorash appeared at the edge of the system, their ships black and jagged against the starlight, engines burning white with speed. The spear fleet formed a long wedge of destroyers and cruisers with massive dreadnoughts at the center of their formation, perfect for punching through fixed defenses, and that was exactly what they intended to do. Elias gave no grand speech. He simply told the fleet to hold until a signal. Then the first wave of human ships moved to meet the wedge, their guns flashing bright in the darkness. The Vorash answered with a wall of plasma and rail fire, shattering 2 human corvettes in seconds. Still, the rest pressed forward, weaving and rolling through the storm, drawing the enemy fire away from the station. Kara's scouts dove in from above, slicing into the Vorash rear ranks before vanishing again. The Spear fleet kept driving forward their dreadnoughts, shrugging off the lighter attacks. Every kilometer they closed was another second stolen from the humans. Then Elias gave the order for the trap. Rourke's modified haulers, which had been drifting unnoticed near the debris field, powered up, revealing their hidden weapons. Massive magnetic launchers loaded with asteroid chunks mined from the Seraph belt the first volley tore into the Vorash flank, smashing shields and ripping open a destroyer. The second volley followed before the enemy could react, forcing the wedge to tilt just enough to expose its side. That was when a main human strike force appeared from warp their ships, emerging in tight formation right inside the gap, their guns pouring fire into the exposed Vorash cruisers before the dreadnoughts could turn. Kara led the scouts, and again, this time, targeting engines and power cores. One dreadnought's drive went dark, spinning it out of line. Another exploded in a silent bloom of molten shards. But the Vorash did not break. They shifted their wedge and pushed harder their forward ranks, cutting in the human center. Elias felt the deck shudder as his own cruiser took a glancing hit. Alarms flaring, he ordered the fleet to fall back and stage his trading space for survival, drawing the Spear fleet deeper toward the gravity well of Seraph. Kara's voice came through tight with strain, asking how close he wanted them to get. Elias answered, close enough that they cannot stop. At the edge of the planet's gravity, the humans made their final stand. Rourke's engineers had placed charges on a chain of derelict freighters hidden in low orbit when the Vorash Spear fleet charged through the upper atmosphere, chasing the retreating humans. Elias gave the signal. The freighters ignited in a blinding chain reaction. The shockwave combined with the pull of Seraph's gravity through the Vorash formation into chaos, ships colliding, shields failing, engines burning out. The humans surged back and striking the scattered pieces of the Spear fleet. Hours later, the wreckage drifted above Seraph, glowing in the dark. The surviving Vorash ships fled, limping toward the void. The human fleet held the field, battered but alive in the war table. Back on the council station, the victory shone like a beacon. But Elias knew the cost: dozens of ships lost, hundreds of crew gone, and the Vorash would not forgive this defeat. Yet something had changed. The council delegates who once spoke of humans as reckless now spoke of them as essential. Valorn himself admitted that without them the Spear fleet would have broken through to the heart of council space. For the first time, humans were not just fighters on the edge, they were a wall. And somewhere far beyond the rim, in the deepest black, the Vorash warlord Kareth studied the reports, his claws tracing the human name over and over. He had failed to cut out the knife tip. Now he would have to crush the whole blade. The months after the battle above Seraph were a strange quiet across the council lines. The Vorash raids slowed. The Spear fleet lay broken in drifting pieces, but no one believed the war was over. Elias felt the tension every time he walked through the hangar where fresh ships gleamed under work lights, each one a promise that the fight would begin again. Kara kept the scouts sharp, flying long-range patrols in a dark space, while Rourke pushed the engineers harder than ever, building weapons no one had dared design before. In the shadows beyond the rim, Kareth gathered the remains of his fleet and called in every hidden shipyard, every secret outpost. The Vorash were predators by nature, and the humans had wounded them badly. The warlord wanted no more single strikes, no more wedges. He would gather a storm so large that it would roll across the stars and crush everything in its path. The council and the humans together, if needed, his lieutenants obeyed for fear as much as loyalty. And soon the storm began to form. The first signs were faint, missing convoys in sectors far apart, whispers of ghost signals deep in the black. Then a scout wing under Kara's command vanished without a trace. She returned with only half her pilots, their ships torn and scorched, and with a warning they had seen something vast, something moving with its own shadow across the stars. Not a fleet in lines, but a swarm in layers. The Vorash had abandoned formation for raw, overwhelming force. On the council station, Valorn stood before the war table, his voice grim. The swarm was already moving toward the core worlds. If it reached them, the council would fall. The human sector lay in its path. Elias listened in silence, then asked how long until contact. Valorn answered 2 weeks, if they did nothing less. If the swarm pushed at full speed, Rourke spoke, then saying they could not meet that many ships head on, but maybe they could cut the head from a beast. The plan was dangerous, almost certain to kill them. But it was the only chance. Kara would lead a false retreat, pulling a section of the swarm away toward a gravity trap, while Elias took the main strike force in a deep warp jump behind enemy lines. Their target was Kareth's flagship, the heart of the swarm. If the warlord fell, the rest might scatter. Without his command, the council forces could then pick them apart. The day of the strike began with darkness. The swarm entered human space like a living shadow, ships upon ships filling the void, their weapons already burning against the first defense lines. Kara's wing slashed across their flanks, drawing fire, then pulling away faster than pursuit could catch. Rourke's engineers triggered the gravity trap, a chain of collapsing singularity charges that tore the pursuing Vorash from the fight, but the main body pressed on, unaware of the knife about to cut deep into its heart. Elias led the strike force in silence through the warped corridors of space, every crew aboard knowing this was not a battle they could retreat from. When they emerged, the flagship loomed ahead, a fortress of black metal and crimson light, bristling with guns and shield towers around it. Smaller ships swirled like bodyguards ready to die for their master. Elias ordered the fleet to split two wings, drawing the guards away, while his cruiser and 3 escorts punched through the opening toward the massive hull. The Vorash flagship opened fire at once, the first escort shattering under a rain of plasma, the second rolling to take hits meant for Elias's ship. Kara's voice came over the channel, saying the swarm was reacting, pulling forces back toward the flagship. It meant they had little time. Rourke shouted that the shields were bleeding power, and they had one run left. Elias drove the cruiser in close, so close that the enemy guns could not track fast enough, then ordered every weapon to fire at a single point on the flagship's armor. The barrage tore a hole just wide enough for a boarding pod. Elias led the assault himself, his boots hitting the black metal deck. Inside, the air thick with the heat of battle, the Vorash defenders came in waves, claws and blades flashing, but the humans pushed forward step by step toward the command spire at the center of the ship. Kara's scouts arrived from above, slicing through bulkheads to join the fight. At the top of the spire, they found Kareth waiting, his armor dark and jagged, his eyes burning like molten glass. His voice carried no fear, only a promise that humanity would be ashes. Elias answered with no words, only action. The fight was brutal, the warlord moving with deadly speed, his claws cutting the air, Elias blocking with his blade again and again, until Rourke's voice in the comm shouted that charges were set. The humans just had to get out. Kareth lunged one last time, but Elias turned the attack, using the warlord's own momentum to drive him into the deck. With a crash, the humans pulled back, racing through fire and smoke as the charges went off. The explosion ripped through the flagship's heart, tearing it apart in a bloom of light so bright it outshone the nearby stars. Back in the void, the swarm faltered without their leader. Ships broke formation, some fleeing, some turning their guns away. The council fleet struck from all sides, forcing the Vorash in a full retreat. The war was not ended, but the storm had broken, and for the first time in years, the stars felt open again. When Elias stepped back onto Haven Point, the people were there waiting. No speeches, no parades, just the quiet knowledge that they were still alive. Kara stood beside him, watching the distant glimmer of wreckage fade into the void. Rourke was already talking about repairs and upgrades because he knew the Vorash would return someday. But until then, humanity had proven something to the galaxy. They were not the weakest link, not the reckless outsiders. They were the ember that refused to die. Somewhere far in the black, fragments of the flagship drifted cold and empty, but among them a single beacon pulsed faint and steady, carrying a signal into the dark. No one heard it yet, but the message was clear: the war was not over, and the Vorash would rise again. And when they did, they would remember the day the humans came for their heart and cut out